Our next session is with Simone Sassoli, who's here from Robin.io. He's the Chief Customer Officer. And Simone is going to discuss Kubernetes as a research or as a resource to automate complex data center app pipelines. With that, Simone, thank you for being here. Appreciate your time, and the floor is yours.
Okay, let's start on infrastructure, which is a topic that we're covering today. And does it get in the way of getting the results that you want, especially at the application level? So what are the things that are in the way as common themes? I'm sure you've seen that it takes weeks to provision infrastructure. And typically it's not aware of the applications. So if you're trying to build something that is generic, it's not simple to do so unless you can instantiate something that is aware of the different type of storage, network, automation that is required. Sorry, I'm having trouble with advancing for some reason. I apologize, but something locked. Here we go. So you need dedicated infrastructure that results in low utilization. And then you are really limiting flexibility, and you have lock-in in the infrastructure that you are creating. That is especially true when you move into data-centric application that have been left behind by Kubernetes, because many of the things that I mentioned before as impediments have been tackled today with modernization of the infrastructure using Kubernetes. But Kubernetes was mostly born out of the need to automate stateless applications, which gives you the cost efficiency that we were looking for by multiple applications being able to share the same cluster, to get productivity out of users because you are using natural environment with ephemeral loads. You have a fully automation for lifecycle management, and you have repeatability of the day two operations. But then you go to the other side, and what happened to the databases, the time series, the big data queries, all the AI, ML applications that required things that provided, unfortunately, a high cost in deployment in silos infrastructure, impediments to innovation because you cannot really create very quick ephemeral loads and share across different teams that may be distributed across the world. Lifecycle management becomes, a matter of weeks and days instead of a matter of minutes. And you have very different operations that are separated by different operations teams that are typically manual when it comes down to day two operations. So think about then the ability to automate the application independent infrastructure. So it's intent driven. You guys have heard the word before about intent driven networking. We're trying to extend that context of intent driven infrastructure, where you can modernize the application without really modification of how it's built. So many times also Kubernetes is associated with microservices, but not necessarily towards applications that are not born natively in the cloud, but they're still required to be used in conjunction and in combination with stateless application and microservices. So you can still do that by modernizing the application without having to modify them. And this gets you to a place where you can have an accelerated deployment and simplify lifecycle management that leads you to self-service, your users being statisticians, being application developer, being data analysts, that can get access to rapid deployment tooling and the agility to have a depth test environment that gives you instant scalability. And at the end of that, what is the benefit you're getting? At the end of the day, it comes towards more productivity, but also the reduction of total cost of ownership. Because you can get multi-tenancy, higher utilization of your resources, you're consolidating the disparate silos that I mentioned earlier. You have guarantees on the SLAs, you get high availability of the environment. And they run anywhere. It's a common theme. Everybody talks about, can I run on-prem? Can I run on the cloud? Can I run on public clouds? Can I run on a hybrid environments? And how do I achieve these results? By picking the right technology that allow me not to be locked in into specific vendors and gives you actually also visibility across a single pane of glass of all the applications that you have deployed. So what we are suggesting, what should you be looking for as an application developer, as an infrastructure provider? At the end of the day, what is the business outcome that can help you to ensure high performance and high availability of data-centric applications? And you need to make sure the infrastructure you're building is application aware, so that compute and storage resources are not managed independently, but managed as a single environment. That you have an active standby service that are deployed in separate racks across separate systems. And you have the notion and the ability to do that specified into how you deploy and then you maintain the application itself. And you have intelligent placement of the services into the appropriate places in storage and compute. And you'll see this becomes more and more relevant, especially as you move towards the edge. So although we are focused on to OSS, BSS, web-based applications, databases that typically reside in the data center, but you're also seeing from what you also heard just earlier from Verizon that even in financial services, they are moving towards the edge with 5G services. And that is more a compute-based element where the placement of services on NUMA awareness of your scheduling, for example, is a very, very important element of how you should be choosing application deployment that is intent-driven at the infrastructure level. So at a high level, what is the infrastructure that you should be looking to build? Kubernetes, it's pretty much the de facto orchestration platform, automation platform around containers. It has different runtimes. So you'll see, from LXC to Docker. You may even have VMs that run into the particular environment. Then you need to have a storage that is aware of the applications that are deployed, that are connected towards virtual networking. And then you have an application workflow manager that gives you the ability to create the automation for the application, not only on day one, but also on day two, and gives you observability, centralized login, and the monitoring element that you need. So how do I achieve all of this into a platform that you can source somewhere that also has the requirement of being able to run bare metal on virtual machines, on public cloud, being Azure, being AWS or Google Cloud, working really anywhere across multiple environments. So when you look at the CNCF landscape, the simple picture I presented is going to give you a number of options that says, okay, so I just put in the middle Kubernetes, great. Now I need to pick one of these distributions and I need to decide, how I'm going to connect it to a CNI element that is the infrastructure, the networking that I need, software-defined networking. And even the context is not that simple because as we were talking about stateful applications, and if you look at something that is fairly complex to do, like an Oracle rack, you realize that natively Kubernetes, for example, does not support multiple NICs. And you need multiple NICs to be able to have traffic that goes east, west, and north, south in Oracle. And that's something that's not come natively. So how do I do that? How can I make sure that I plug in components that allow me to have the stateful application to coexist with the stateless application? And then on the left-hand side, you need to pick a native storage or multiple that are built in. And on top of it, then you need to define the application, you need to build image, and then you need to automate and configure it and get the observability analysis elements in it. So absolutely you can do it yourself. You can pick many of these either open source or supported companies that provide the services, but you can say it's not something that is that simple. It requires a lot of work that hopefully somebody out there has pulled some of these components together and offer it as already proven, they already has the battle scars of having deployed it, understand what are the challenges that application bring, and can help you to accelerate and focus what ultimately your business wants, which is, I want to get to a self-service application marketplace, right? Think of yourself as an application development, as an IT provider internal to your situation, where the same that you would do on AWS, you pick applications, you can do the same and go inside of your organization and say, I already have pre-built what I need, for example, on fraud analytics. And I know that I need these 5 different components that needs to be stitched together to give me the pipeline of application that fraud analytics requires, or real-time risk detection, or deep learning, or many of the other applications that you have deployed for compliance inside the company. And I already have pre-bundled them in a way that, again, the infrastructure is instantiated based on the awareness of what I'm trying to deploy as an application pipeline and what is the intent on how I'm going to use it. So from there, then I can just make it available to the application developers in a way that is still service and can provide it very easily at a click of a button. Now, what you can also do is that now you don't have to have silos anymore. You can have a multi-tenant environment where the resources are shared. And if you have a platform that can manage a significant amount of servers, a significant amount of Kubernetes clusters, now you can actually use role-based access control. You can have logical and physical isolation where your teams can be separated and controlled. Your application can be defined towards a dev, test, and product environment. And you manage the entire life cycle of the application from day 0 to day 2 in a way that gives you the flexibility, the speed to market, the cost savings, and most importantly, the quality of application development that you're looking for. So let's go to some specific use cases. This is where ultimately you want to go to, and for those who are familiar on using a manifest file in the context of Kubernetes to create an application, you declare what are the resources, what are the applications, what are the elements that I need. But can I do it in a way that I can create a template where very simply I can just pick a component, enable service, declare what is the scale, the compute, and the storage that I need, put the placement rules, which are very important because Kubernetes by default does not come with the knowledge of what is the application needing for me. Do I need to place this application in the same data node? Do I have to have containers across different nodes? Do I have to have containers in the same node? What should I be running in the same data center? Am I going to have high availability? Should I have disaster recovery configurations? Should I be running across multiple data centers? And how do I manage that element? And that gives you the ability to have all the Kubernetes components that are auto-created. The storage and network is instantaneously provisioned, the locality, the anti-affinity, the enum-aware policy is enforced, and then you run the workflow to customize the application. And running the workflow and customization means, for example, that at the end of the creation of this particular environment, your user can get an email that says your environment is ready, your login credentials are the following, and your environment is set up as follows. And then how do I do, again, by knowing what type of application that I have deployed in this particular case, for example, Elasticsearch, I can manage the long-term growth of the environment. I want to change the number of instances. I want to increase the storage availability that I have, and I just, takes 11 seconds to do it. I don't have to go through, asking somebody in the IT department to go through 3 different tickets and then configure the system itself. And what about awareness of quality of service? And if I have multiple applications that needs to have a different performance, can actually control the IOPS of the application, can actually have a time series that tells me which application is doing what when, and do a management of it by a click of a button by having default apps. So as I said, if you go back to the previous picture that I showed, all of the components that make up the solution are possible to do yourself, but you're gonna need to have developers that understand not only how to deploy infrastructure at the network, at the storage, at the Kubernetes level, but also how to do automation, and how do you do automation specifically to the applications that you have selected that make up your pipelines. From there, you can take snapshots, which is a key element of how you want to look at really the scalability of the application and the configuration management that is not only related to the data itself, but also to the entirety of the application, because you're not just taking a snapshot at the volume level of the data, but also the configuration of the metadata in such a way that you can take the entire elements that make up the application, you can deploy them as a single app. From there, you can claim clones. You can actually move across different environments in such a way that not just storage volumes are actually used, but the pre and post clones allow you to have hooks that customize the application, it can allow you to move from place to place. And you can do automation for the upgrades of the application themselves. So that as you go through different stages from dev to production, you can actually elect also how to do in production in a way that you can have a timeline that allows you to go back and forth with different stages in the event you have problems. And most importantly, sorry, my screen not advancing. Here we go. How do I do backup and restore of entire application? By moving from on-prem to the cloud and then back into the on-prem environment. That gives me a Git-like workflow for an entire application where I can start on-prem, I can take a snapshot, I can take a clone, I can put it into an object store in the cloud, and then I can move it into different cloud providers, and that's what gives you the portability and doesn't lock you into a single environment that otherwise you would have had with different implementations.